Hey folks, today I want to run you through the D500, possibly the most hotly anticipated camera of 2016. Definitely the hottest from Nikon. I'm going to run through a full user guide, but I'm going to be focusing on the things that are unique to it because it's a 10 frames per second speed demon, how to customize it, and the brand new features. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume if you're buying a camera at this price point, you've used Nikon before and you don't need the really basic stuff. If you do want that from the ground up, I'll put a card above where you can see one of the user guides I did for like a Nikon D500. That includes all the basics and most of it applies to this camera fine. Then this one augments it with the things that are specific to it. Before we jump into this, jump on over to mattgranger.com. You will get a pop-up offering you to sign up to my mailing list and you can download my free guide to improving your portraiture. And if you click up the top to the workshops tab, you can see where I'm going in the world, the different tours and workshops I run all around the world. So, as I said, I'm going to focus in on this, looking at the new features, the things that apply to it being what it is, a speed demon, and then how to customize it, my custom tips on setting up a camera and the things that you want to think about to make it your own. At the end of the day, this is your bad boy. You want it to work for you, not to just work as the engineer intended it to. And I will be going through SnapBridge in this. If you see on the top camera there, I've got a top of the line Samsung S7 Edge here, and it's still slowly trying to actually communicate. That's an issue we've found with SnapBridge. But let's go through one by one. So first of all, the big things in this that are new, apart from it's got a top of the line focusing system, it's doing 10 frames a second, all of the things that go along with that. It's got new digic processor, it's using XQD cards as well as SD. All of that we'll get through, but the big things I wanted to talk about here are 4K video and then SnapBridge. And there we go. That's been running for about 5 minutes and it's now just brought up a gallery of the images. SnapBridge, not very fast, but in certain applications I think it's going to be useful, but we'll talk about its limitations in a second. So as we go through this, we'll throw up on screen a little graphic of where you can find the different information that you need here. For the video, it's got a dedicated movie shooting menu here. If you scroll on down, you can see frame size and frame rate. If you're in Australia or parts of the world that use PAL, go for 25 frames a second. If you're in the States using NTSC, then probably go for 30 frames a second. 38, 40, 21, 60 is their 4K, what they call 4K. Or you can go down to 1080, so 1920 by 1080, and then you can go at double frame rate, so 60 or 50, and that means that you can slow it down to half speed and still have full quality. When you jump out of that, you can go to movie quality, but only if you're in 1080. If you're in 1080, choosing high quality, jumping into the movie mode, you get a full half an hour. On some of the cameras, when you chose high quality, you only got 20 minutes, but here you get a full half an hour, 29.59 anyway, and then if you choose normal and then go in, it's the same. It's unfortunate, but they set it at 29.59. You may have heard this before, because of different taxation laws around the world that say if it records over half an hour, it's a video camera, and then it goes into a higher tax bracket. Ridiculous, but the camera certainly, being able to record 4K for up to half an hour, could manage with its hardware to do far more than half an hour in 1080. But that's what they're giving you, so be it. Now, SnapBridge. This is the new technology from Nikon. This is the first camera bringing it out. They announced it at the press conference that I was at in Las Vegas in January. Now, at that time, they said by March, it would be the application SnapBridge would be available for Android and for Apple iOS. As of June, it's only available for Android, and we're waiting for it to become available for Apple. So if you're an Apple user and you want to use this, you're going to have to wait. Unfortunately, it's just not available as an app, so then the SnapBridge is unusable to you as of today. So what this will let you do, the thing that they're kind of positioning it uses Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and it also uses the NFC of the camera. So you can pair using NFC, you just put them together, a code, they'll talk to each other, then they're paired. And then in theory, it's as simple as you turn them both on, you open the SnapBridge app on your Android phone, maybe your Apple phone, and then they will start communicating with each other. You can go in and take photos, you can control the camera from your phone, and that's using the Wi-Fi direct from the camera. You don't need to have a Wi-Fi hotspot for that to work. I mean, you don't need to be in a network, you don't need to be connected to a traditional router. And then you're able to passively and low energy use transfer photos as you're shooting to your device. So potentially a really cool thing. And this is first generation technology. I don't want to bag it unnecessarily, but I find it so slow it's unusable. This is a brand new top of the line, hardly used phone. It's not clogged up with apps. This is a brand new camera. It's not clogged up with whatever. And it's still really slow. It took ages to pair, and then now you can see the spinning icon. Since I clicked out of that one photo, it's still trying to load up an index of photos. So if I wanted to choose one to share on the fly, that's how long it takes. And then the actual transfer process is incredibly slow. So I sincerely hope that the future generations are going to speed this up, because there we go, it's just now loading up the photos and everything. So let's do an actual test here. We'll pull up an image. You can see it hasn't worked out what the images are just yet, but I'll see if it'll let me choose one. Nope, it's not gonna let me. So whilst that's thinking, we'll get in and talk about some other things. So being that this is a speed demon, it's got the focusing system from the new D5. It's using XQD. Here we go, it's just loaded up. Shooting some sports, that's the review that we were doing on this guy. So let's open up one of these and then let's download and let's see. So we can either do original or 2 megapixel. This is, let's assume it's for social media, so 2 megapixel is going to be fine. I hit OK, and then let's just see how long that takes whilst we start to talk about the camera a bit more. So there's a couple of different things you want to work through. Okay, it's saying that it got it, so that was a lot quicker than we found in previous testing. Maybe something's working better now. Let's just go into the photos and check that it has actually transferred. SnapBridge, there we go, it did. So I take that back. In our original testing, it was taking minutes to transfer a single file. That only took like 10 seconds. Here, let's open it up and say, okay, download selected picture. Unfortunately, because I minimized the app, it closed it, and now it'll take that long to load up the pictures again. So let's wait and see. Okay, back to it. Focus modes. On the side of your camera, near the lens release, you've got your AF and manual focus adjustment switch. Holding down that button brings up your different focus modes. So adjusting the back one is if you want AFS or AFC, single or continuous. And then the front one is adjusting what mode you want it in. So for shooting sports and that kind of thing, you almost certainly are going to want it in autofocus continuous and with tracking focus. And this thing tracks like an absolute beast. One thing you might want to do, depending on what it is that you're shooting, or if you're shooting a headshot even and you want it to be at the top of the frame because you're in portrait orientation, is use the rear dial here to move your point. Now you got to make sure it's not on L, because that means you've locked it. So turn it off that, give the button a tap to wake it up, and then you'll be able to toggle that to move your point around. I tend to leave it in the middle so that if I'm in the heat of the moment and I don't know where the action's coming, and it's like, okay, there's the guy with the ball, I know to frame it on the center to find my point. If I'm doing something more specialized like a headshot and I want to keep it right on the eye, then moving it up to the top of the frame is often the way to go. Okay, so one thing that Justin and I found when we were out shooting the soccer/football match was that when I was tracking a subject and the person would run behind other people, the focus would quickly move to the people in front of them and I would lose track of them. You can actually fix that by going into the custom menu setting A3, and then you can turn it to delayed so it won't refocus that quickly. And you can also adjust the subject motion to either being steady or erratic, which will help depending on the sport that you're shooting. Let's talk about your frames per second. So you've got single shot release, continuous low, or continuous high. Now, continuous high is going to be at its maximum. It'll do up to 10 frames a second. You can probably customize that. But going into the shooting menu, that's your second one. Going down from on the left from top to bottom, you've got your playback, your photo shooting menu, movie shooting menu, custom settings, setup menu, retouch, and my menu. Okay, so in our custom setting menu, if you go into shooting and display, that's option D, and then go down to D1, that's your continuous mode shooting speed low. And going in there, you can set that anything from 2 to 9 frames a second, or 1 to 9 frames a second. So if you put it in 2 frames a second, continuous low is going to sound like this. If you put it all the way up to, say, 6, it's going to sound like this. And if you put it into continuous high, it's going to be at its maximum 10. So that's where you're really making use of the speed of this. And this is really designed for it. The whole pathways through the camera are at top speed. It's got the majority of the guts from the D5. It's really quite something. Something that you're going to want to set up is whether you want it to be RAW plus JPEG, or just JPEG, because how quick it can clear the buffer will still depend on that. So if we go into our photo shooting menu and then scroll down to image quality, here you can choose if you want it to be RAW and fine JPEG, all the way through the different options of JPEG, just RAW, or just JPEG, and then all of the JPEG functions, or TIFF. If I'm going to be shooting RAW, I'll often just shoot RAW. You could have it shoot JPEG to the second card, for example, but note that the buffer fills up a lot more quickly if you're shooting RAW and JPEG than if you're just shooting RAW or just shooting JPEG. Now, the fact of the matter is, it caps itself at 200 shots anyway, so going back into shooting and display, D2, you can set your maximum continuous release to 200 or anything less than that. So let's put it to 200, for example, and let's just hear how that sounds. We're on continuous high. I'll move that away so that you can keep hearing me. So it's going to run out at 200 shots. But if you're shooting JPEG, once you lift your finger, how quickly the buffer is cleared is going to be a whole lot quicker. When you're, okay, you can see it's already kind of struggling there, and we're not at the 200. So it's not able to just get the 200 at full maximum burst. At the end there, we're probably getting, I don't know, 7 or 8 frames a second maximum, not the full 10. So be it. Next thing you want to think about is, if you are going to be shooting some sports and you want to just be able to get them out, you're not going to be doing a whole lot of work on it. A lot of sports photographers do just shoot in JPEG. So a raw JPEG in fine coming from this is likely to be around 10 megabytes. So it's a big enough file to print in a newspaper, to use for just about any kind of online purpose. It's only if you're not sure about your dynamic range, that you may be in really contrasty lighting and you're going to need to work the file, you're going to need to do other kind of detailed editing on it, or there's a chance that you're going to want to work it up and print it really big. That's where having the RAW is really going to come into its own. I know a lot of people have their own way of shooting on that, and I personally, in most situations, will be shooting RAW. It's just in some situations where it's only going to be for casual use that JPEG will be just fine. Okay, let's talk about customizing your camera. There's so many options that you can customize on this. And keep in mind, it has a bunch of function buttons hidden around the camera that you're also able to go in and customize. At the end, I'm going to mention your personal My Menu settings. That's also where we're going to think about our customizable buttons. But just in terms of straight up settings, there's a lot of options here for you as well. So let's start off with, what are you going to do with your cards? Where are you going to write things? So this has SD and XQD cards in it. And you can, if you want, have it send some things to one slot, some things to a different slot. I would basically put the most data hungry things to your XQD. So if you're not going to be shooting heaps and heaps of full quality raw fast frames per second stills, but you will be shooting 4K video, then I would put my 4K to the XQD and the stills to the other card. or vice versa if you're not going to be doing too much. The fact of the matter is a camera like this doing 10 frames a second, 20 megapixels in RAW, that uses more data than 4K does. So fast SD cards will be fine to keep up with 4K video generally, but the XQD cards are just so much faster again. So think about how you want to do it, and then how do you want to run your second card slot. If we run into our photo shooting menu, on the first page we have secondary slot function. So you can have it as overflow. So then once it fills up the first card, it moves on to the second card. You can have it as backup, so it just writes the same thing to each one. Or you can have it so that the RAW goes to your primary card and the JPEG to your secondary. Being that the SD is slower and JPEG is smaller, that kind of makes sense. You know, you can be shooting them both away. XQD can keep up with your RAWs, the SD can keep up with your JPEGs. It's not a bad way of doing it. Then at the end of the shoot, if you find, oh, I don't need the RAWs from today, you can just grab the stuff off the SD card. Okay, something else you might want to think about is your back button focus. Now, I like to use this for sports. It really depends on you and how you like to shoot though. So your camera comes set up that you push the shutter release and that does the autofocus. You push it halfway, it focuses, and then when you push it all the way, it takes the actual shots. But you can also use on the back of the camera the AF on button. So you push that and it will focus, and then you put the shutter release down. So if you go into menu option A8 under customize custom menu settings, so A is autofocus, 8 is AF activation. If you go in there and say AF on only, and then put that on, now it will only use the back button focus. Now why that's handy is if you're shooting sports and say you focus on the goalie, you focus in on him, he isn't moving, you're not moving. And then you're looking around, and then the ball's coming to the goalie and you want to shoot, you just hit the shutter release button and you don't have to worry about it trying to hunt for focus again. It's going to just shoot. The shutter button only shoots then. It's not involved in the autofocus process. It just means that you need to remember that when you think, now they're going up the other end, you need to hit your rear AF button to make sure it then gets the new action into focus for you. Okay, just whilst we're chatting here, the software's ready now, so let's open up an image here, tell it that we want to download this one, but this time I'm going to choose to download the original size. This one is actually 11 megabytes. So let's see how long this is going to take to transfer. Keeping in mind you wouldn't need 11 megabytes for most social media applications. Okay, that's saying it's done in that time. So I'm quite impressed with that. I thought it was taking a lot longer than that. So there we go. You can see 11 megapixel detail. We can go right in and see heaps of stuff in the shot. So it's more the pairing time, the turning it on, and then the going through and actually getting everything ready for you to look at, to work out if you want to download things. So if we jump back out and go to camera control now, I'm actually going to say let's do remote photography. And then just for giggles, I'll point it up at me because I'm seeing myself on a monitor over there. Okay, so you can see I've told it to do remote photography and it's just thinking. It's not ready. It's trying to talk to the camera to tell it, I want you to do this. So if you were using this in a clinch situation where you need to act fast, this realistically may not be suitable for you in its current generation. Again, we need to wait for that to do its thing. One thing I like to do on the camera is to have it show me a black and white preview. Now, I find this really handy, and I've talked about it in previous videos, in situations where you've got strong shadows, strong highlights, and it's, maybe you don't want to follow the histogram, you're trying to just go off the rear screen. Having it in black and white preview can really focus your eye to where the shadows are. If you're out shooting street photography, you may not notice when there's hard shadows on someone's face in color because the face is, the people's skin tones are distracting. But when it's in black and white and you abstract all of that, then you can clearly see where the shadows are. So if you go into the photo shooting menu and set picture control, you can see I already have it here, monochrome. I tend to go in and tell it to add an extra bit of contrast there. And then when I take a shot, again, back at myself, because, you know, why not? Then it shows me it in black and white. So it's really easy for me to see my shadows and highlights. If you turn that off and put it into, say, portrait, do the same thing, then in certain situations, reviewing that, it's a little bit more difficult. And anyway, I often like to see how a shot's gonna look in black and white because I do make a lot of my shots black and white. Anyway, okay, so it is now set up and ready. So here we go. This is the camera. So if I'm telling it to focus on the screen of me in the distance there, okay, it's done it. And then if I tell it to take a photo, okay, now I have to say that is faster than we had when we were testing it before. It's performing better now, but the fact that it goes up and down is a little worry. But the pictures themselves have not loaded yet, so they're still coming through. Okay, next one is your auto ISO. A lot of people are using this, a camera like this. Its base ISO goes up to 51,000 and it's got a bunch of boost modes beyond that. Think about what the maximum ISO you're willing to shoot at is. I recommend experimenting a while, taking lots of shots and then checking them. And you might find that you're happy with 3200, 6400, the maximum ISO even. If you're fine with that, then so be it. But if we jump in to our shooting menu, go into ISO sensitivity settings, then in there you can select what is the maximum ISO you're willing to let it go to, all the way through to high 5, which is the equivalent of 1.5 million or something. Or you might say, I'm willing to let it go up to 16,000, for example. And then that's the highest it'll let you go. And of course, there may then be times in super low light that your shutter speed gets a little bit too low. So setting your minimum shutter speed for what you're shooting then becomes important. So if you're shooting really fast moving things, you might want to tell it a specific shutter speed. Like for tennis, I don't want it below 1/1000th of a second. For something slower moving like soccer, maybe 1/500th of a second, something like that. Or you can put it to auto, which is pretty clever. So like this is a 90mm lens, so I might, if I say just put it on auto in the middle, it will make sure that my shutter speed is at least 1/100th of a second, the closest one to 90mm. You know, the old rule of thumb of getting your shutter speed to match or slightly exceed your focal length. If I say I want it faster, then it's going to go a stop above that. Faster it's going to go 2 stops ahead, so that'll be 1/200th or 1/400th. Or I can go slower and say, I'm actually fine to handhold it at a 50th or a 25th. So you really need to adjust. If you're going to use that, you need to adjust it each time depending on the situation that you're shooting in, whether you're on tripod. This is a macro lens, so you know my subjects generally won't move too fast with this one. Another one in your setup menu that I suggest you take a look at is, do you want to shoot Adobe RGB or sRGB? Now, I've done a video on this before. Again, I'll pop a card above explaining the difference between the two. I would generally recommend that you set it to Adobe RGB and then you can adjust it later in editing. If you're only going to be using this for, you know, snap bridging it to social media, that's a case where using sRGB may be for you, but if there's ever a chance that you might want to print things, then I would shoot it in Adobe RGB. If you want more detail on that, check out the card above. I'll also have a direct clickable link in the caption below. Next one is to think about your center weighted area. Now this is one a lot of people don't think about, but I think it's quite handy. Go into the custom menu, it's under B, number 6. So when you're doing your metering modes, you've got matrix, which will look at the entire frame and work out how much light is there over here, up here, over the whole frame. Then you've got your center weighted, and then you've got a point. Now for center weighted, you have the option, do you want it to be 6mm, 8mm, 10mm, or 13mm, or an average? Basically, how big of a central point do you want it to look at? So if you want it to just look at a smaller area in the center, put it on 6mm. If you want it to take a bigger sample size, but from the center of the frame, then put it up to say 13mm. Again, that may vary depending on what scene you're in and where the hot spots are that you're trying to avoid. But if you know which one it's set on, you'll start to learn it and get comfortable with shooting with it in that way. Another one is in your setup menu is to actually set up your copyright information. You can go in there and put the artist's name, and because this is a touchscreen, you can actually just type it in straight there onto the screen, which is quite handy, use the space and everything. And then that will be embedded into every file, and it actually copies through on the files to SnapBridge onto your phone. So then if they go online, that's written into the metadata who was the artist and who owns the copyright. That's kind of handy, right? Another one that you might want to set up is in your photo shooting menu is the photo name. So file naming, it's set to DSC, but you could change that. For example, I'm at Granger Photography, so I could change it to MGP, or you could change it to ABC or whatever you like. So just to make it differentiated, you might even do it. So I'm say using the D500 and the D5, I might make this one D50 or 500 and then make the D5_D5, something like that. So then I can differentiate just by looking at the file name which camera that I had taken it on. That can be handy if you're shooting more than one camera in your lineup. Now the last one that I wanted to run through for customization, and this is one that you really want to set up after you've been shooting a while. If this is not your first Nikon camera, you've been shooting for a while and you already know, then jump straight in there. Otherwise, spend a bit of time to figure this out. But your My Menu setting, going into Menu, it's the last one. You can create a custom menu there with the things that you use frequently. So it could be the color space, it could be what file settings that you're going to be using. A lot of them now you have as direct buttons. This is like an almost pro level camera, so you get a lot more direct access buttons on the top. But it's handy to have the most used things that are 2 or 3 levels down in the menu that you find yourself having to root around for a bit, and putting them straight into the My Menu. And then those things that you're really using a lot, the 1 or 2 things that you use the most, go ahead and put them straight into the custom function buttons. You've got a couple of them hidden around the camera, and you can actually customize each of those by going into the custom menu setting, then F for controls, and it's F1. So you can go through and adjust all of those different buttons, as well as your AF on, the little, basically all the buttons, including even your PV depth of field preview. You can customize all of those different buttons. And then going out to G1, you can do it again for video. So then when you're in video mode, each of those buttons can have a different feature, a different custom setup, so that they do something else for you. So if you haven't seen it, I did a video review of the D500. It's a really impressive little camera. So if you have bought this, congratulations. I'm sure you're going to get a lot from it. Just take the time to get to know its limitations and how you like to use it, and customize it. It will save you a lot of headaches down the road to know it's all set up the way that you like to use it. Again, jump on over to the website. You can get my guide to improving your portraiture by signing up to the mailing list. You can check out all my different download courses on the workshops page as well. And I hope you found this of use. Please leave me a comment for any other cameras or camera systems that you'd like to see a walkthrough, either this kind of specific customization one or a more fundamental one for your brand of camera. Thanks guys, I hope you enjoyed it.